Now for an anterior pelvic sway, it's a little bit different. The symptoms that you'll experience from an anterior pelvic sway don't directly contribute to OP like the anterior pelvic tilt will. But what an anterior pelvic sway will do is it'll exacerbate your other OP mechanics, particularly overpronation and a locked sacroiliac joint. So in an anterior pelvic tilt, we saw our pelvis tilt forward. In an anterior pelvic sway, we're going to see the opposite. You're going to see your pelvis actually just shift forward. So if I grab a femur here, and so normally you've got a nice straight line. In anterior pelvic sway, the pelvis has moved forward, so now the femur is relatively back and kind of angled away from the pelvis as opposed to being straight down underneath it. Additionally, your spine is now going to be pulled forward, so it's going to actually be back behind your pelvis because you've been shifting it forward, and so your body can't allow that to happen. It's going to pull the whole spine forward with it. It won't arch the back in the same way, but it is going to create a whole bunch of issues as it tries to compensate for the fact that you've shifted its base of support forward. And these things are what happen when you have an anterior pelvic sway. Now, for your OP, it means a few things. As you shift this pelvis forward, the knee is going to hyperextend backwards to compensate as the femur moves backwards. This is going to create and exacerbate your overpronation and your oversupination, which is of course going to increase the load that's going into your adductor area, as we've talked about in previous videos. Also, as you shift the pelvis forward, and we'll talk about in the sacroiliac joint locking video, you're pulling your sacrum forward. So what ends up happening is these two joints, which need to be free to move when you're walking, end up becoming extremely locked on the sacrum. And so what you have is an extremely locked sacroiliac joint, which also is going to exacerbate and create your OP in your osteitis pubis. So you have these two conditions here that are exacerbated by an anterior pelvic sway. Now, whether it's an anterior pelvic tilt or an anterior pelvic sway, the change in position of your pelvis, forward or forward like this, actually closes down the space in your hip joint. And so what you'll end up doing to try and compensate is you'll actually turn the hip out and you'll turn your foot out to make up for the fact that your pelvis is pushing forward or you're tipping forward. You'll do that. You'll turn the hip out. As you do that, the foot will turn out. And of course, if you're turning out the foot, you're now stretching your adductors. So you're more likely to be walking and running with this turned out foot, and you're going to be stretching your adductors with every single step you take. So whether it's an anterior pelvic tilt or an anterior pelvic sway, you're creating a host of conditions that are essentially going to be exacerbating your osteitis pubis. Hey there. That video was probably really complicated. OP is really complicated. So why don't you let me explain it to you in person? Book in for a free 20-minute Skype consult. I can assess you, tell you what OP is, you can ask me as many questions as you like. We can go into detail about the Skype process and how it works, and we can start working on the things that you need to do to fix your OP and get back to your life. So please, book in for a free session. It's completely obligation free, and let's get started.